This episode of From the Woods is titled The Devil's Soul, written and narrated by me, Evan Bond. Please consider subscribing and enjoy the story. Beck enjoyed a good bargain hunt as much as the next person. No, that wasn't quite right. Beck enjoyed a bargain hunt more than the next person. If it would save even a few dollars, Beck would go out of his way to get that deal. Sure, he'd likely spend more in gas than he saved on deals, but he didn't care. His heart raced a little faster when he swiped his card, knowing he had found the best deal possible. To someone like Beck, the thrift store was a holy place. Forget major retailers like Target or any store found at the mall. Most of the time, bargain hunting began and ended at his local thrift shop. Most everything in this world lost its value immediately after it was purchased, so why not let someone else pay for that depreciation? If it made sense when car shopping, it made sense with clothing, home goods, and everything in between. Like many other days before, Beck found himself browsing through his local thrift store. His old pair of shoes, which he had run so ragged the sole was barely hanging on, were in need of replacement. A brand new pair would cost him a minimum of $30 at the retail stores. But here, he could browse the $5 discount bin. Sure, the shoes would be worn and might only last 6 months to a year, but shoes never lasted that long these days anyway. Not with all the cheaply made crap out there. He fished through the bins looking for the best pair of the lot, but wasn't finding much. He supposed he could take a trip downtown to another thrift store, but his shoes weren't likely to survive the trip. There had to be a pair here he could snag. Every pair was either too worn or the wrong size. The pile on the floor was getting larger by the second, and every time the store clerk walked by, she gave him a nasty look as if he would not put the shoes all back in the bin the way he had found them. Peering over the bin, he stared down in defeat. Only 2 pairs of shoes left, and they were both women's. In frustration, he scooped the discarded shoes up into a small armful, tossing them back into the bin. The last armful he chucked harder than he meant to out of frustration, and a pair of rejected sneakers bounced off the rim and fell behind the bin. Beck bent down and stuck his head behind the bin looking for the lost shoes, only to discover another pair hidden in the darkness. They were beautiful. Perfect black sneakers with a wonderful red trim, perhaps the nicest pair of shoes he had ever seen at the shop. Better yet, they were barely worn down as if the previous owner had never even worn them once. Doing his best to hide his excitement, Beck pulled the shoes from behind the bin and walked across the room to a bench where he could try them on. They looked to be the perfect size, and he hoped they were as comfortable as they looked. Sitting down, he kicked his old shoes off and pushed them to the side. Gently placing the new pair on the floor, Beck slipped his feet inside. They were the most comfortable pair of shoes he had ever worn. He decided then and there he would buy them, no matter the cost. In fact, he would be wearing them out of the store. He looked all around for a price tag, but couldn't find one. Lacing them up, he stood as he snatched up his old pair of shoes. They would be promptly tossed in the trash can outside. With his old shoes tucked under his arm, Beck made his way towards the front, stopping short of the cash register. "Just these," he said, pointing down at his feet. The lady leaned over the counter and stared at the shoes with a raised eyebrow as if to say she were unimpressed. How could she not just love these shoes? They were fantastic. "Is there a price tag on them?" she asked, picking up the barcode scanner. Beck made a show of lifting up one foot and showcasing the lack of tag as he shook his head. The clerk shrugged and tapped on the register. After a few moments, a number flashed on a credit card reader. $10, he asked, looking down at the reader, then down at his shoes. With a shrug of his own, he pulled his credit card free and swiped. These shoes were worth it. Not only did they look amazing, they were comfortable. Walking out of the store, he tossed his old pair of shoes into the trash can with a flick of his wrist. He was feeling good and ready to take on the day. As he walked by the trash, he noticed a small wad of green paper laying on top. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a $10 bill. "Well, what luck!" he exclaimed as he picked it free from the trash. He shoved the money in his pocket and began to stroll down the sidewalk towards home, whistling as he went. Life seemed better with these new shoes. The birds chirped louder, the air blew softer, the sky looked clearer. These shoes were the best thing that had ever happened to him. "Hey, pal," a man on the corner called as Beck approached. "Nice shoes." Beck wanted to say thank you and brag about how he got them for the low, low price of only $10, and how he had found $10 in the trash can, so he technically got them for free. He wanted to smile and wish the man a good day, but words tumbled from his mouth outside of his control. "Go fuck yourself, swine," a foreign voice said from within his own throat. The man looked appalled at the insult and quickly crossed the road when the light changed. Now, Beck carried on his way, unsure what happened. Maybe a strange tic or the onset of Tourette's. Was that possible? He shook his head as if to clear his mind and continued on the journey home. Except, he was no longer heading in the right direction. He was walking, but his legs were no longer under his control. His feet pulled him left and off the sidewalk. A car zipped by, blaring its horn as it narrowly missed scraping Beck on the asphalt. Despite his beating heart and the fear rising in his gut, Beck continued to walk across the road. Cars raced by with screeching tires and screaming horns as they all narrowly missed squashing him like a bug. "What the fuck? Oh god, what the hell is happening?" Tears streamed down his face as his feet continued to carry him to the other side of the road and, to his relief, back on the sidewalk. His feet continued to carry him down the sidewalk in the opposite direction he had been walking. He looked down at his new shoes, no longer excited about the deal he had received. Instead, he was terrified of the shoes. Something was very wrong. No matter how desperately he tried to stop himself from walking, bend down, and remove the shoes, he found he had no control over his own body. Something else had taken over. "What is happening to me?" Beck cried, getting no response. Instead, he only carried forward. When he finally came to a stop, he found he was standing on a bridge overlooking a steep drop above a railroad track. His body slowly started to turn to face the guardrail. "Oh god, no, please, no, oh god, please stop!" He tried to struggle and pull himself from this terrible nightmare, but he only continued to turn. One foot rose and planted itself firmly on the guardrail, then his hands reached out to steady himself as the other foot began to rise. Beck cried and begged for whatever this was to end. "Hey!" a voice called out from behind. "Be careful up there!" Beck couldn't turn to face this mystery man, nor could he say a word. Desperately, he wanted to cry out for help and beg this man to pull him down and remove his shoes, though he knew it would sound insane. Instead, he stood there feeling as if his body would leap at any moment. Before he could, two strong arms wrapped around him and pulled him backward, pinning him to the ground. "Whatever you were thinking about doing up there, man, I'm telling you it ain't worth it. You've got plenty to live for, no matter what the thoughts tell you." Tears streamed down Beck's face, but he still couldn't speak. He stared up into the face of this heroic stranger, who had saved his life, wishing he could say anything. The man took a step back, sticking out his hand for Beck to take so he could help him to his feet. "Come on, man," the stranger said. "We can go wherever you want and talk about your troubles. Lunch is on me." Beck flicked his eyes towards his feet over and over in an attempt to alert the man to his seemingly haunted shoes. Finally, the man's eyes drifted down to Beck's feet and nodded. Yeah, nice shoes, man. Now, come on." Before the man could say another word, Beck's foot lashed out, kicking the man in the diaphragm. He heard the wind rush from the man's lungs as he stumbled backward and fell over the guardrail. There was a horrific scream as the man tumbled towards the tracks, landing with a sickening crunch. Within a second, Beck was back up on his feet and bending over the guardrail, forced to see the mangled body below. He tried to shut his eyes, but whatever entity possessed him made him stand there and stare. There was a scream from across the road from a woman saying she was going to call the police. Beck did not move. He only stood there, staring at the man he had been forced to murder. Worse still, there was an unnatural smile on his face that he couldn't control. He wondered if the nightmare would end. Would he ever get his body back, or would he spend the rest of his days living as a puppet to the devil somehow hidden in his shoes? As he contemplated, a strange sensation washed over him. His body was now back under his control. He could move his arms and legs without interference from whatever puppet master had been controlling him before. Beck let his body drop to the sidewalk as he attempted to pull the shoes off his feet, but they wouldn't budge. "No, no, 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 no," he screamed, hoping it had finally come to an end. "Somebody help me," he cried, but no one would dare come close to him. People stood on the opposite side of the street, either on the phone with the police or recording the situation. "Get these shoes off of me," he cried again, but no one approached. As the wailing sirens approached in the distance, Beck clawed at the shoes in a desperate attempt to pry them from his feet, but they wouldn't budge. Laughter roared in his mind as he cried and screamed and begged for someone, anyone, to help him.